up, y'all? It's Jess. Welcome back to the channel. So today is going to be a special video that's just kind of thrown in as a bonus for y'all. We're playing The Silent Truth. We're going through the Unrd series, The Silent Truth. It's about a guy named Sam Patterson, and he is on death row for murdering a man named Michael Franklin. So we're going through that series. If you have not caught up, please catch up. It's going to be, the card is going to be up here for y'all so that you can go through the playlist and catch up on the playlist if you haven't already. But in the series, there's an actual blog that one of the characters, Ava, has set up, and it's called The Silent Truth Podcast. And I told y'all, like in the first episode, that it feels very Serial-esque. Like, if y'all are fans of the podcast Serial, like in real life, this journalist Ava is basically outlining every single thing that happened, and she's reviewing case files, and she has looked at everything about the case. And so she's made a blog and she's made a podcast about it. She does have a blog, and the true crime fan that suggestions is, I need to review the case. I need to know if it's circumstantial evidence or not. You know, I got my degree in Law and Order SVU. I got my degree in Forensic Files. I love all of those shows, y'all. Snapped. I used to watch Snapped every Sunday when I was in college. Every single Sunday on the Oxygen Network. And then Serial came along, got into Serial, the podcast, binged that. Like, Jessica's a true crime stan over here, okay? Anyway, I say all that to say, I want to go through this blog and see if we can get the details of the Michael Franklin case. Okay, so this is the overview, y'all. Imagine for a second that cops turn up at your door and arrest you. Imagine they place you in a cell and start questioning you for murder. You tell them, I didn't kill nobody. They say, prove it. Tell us where you were at the time. Tell us why your DNA is at the scene of the crime. Tell us why the perpetrator matches your description. Give us a reason not to arrest you for murder. And you say nothing. This is the case of Samuel Alexander Patterson. So perhaps if you're from Virginia, you'll recognize the name. If you're out of the loop, then let me introduce you. Samuel Patterson was raised in Oakville by a foster family, the Pattersons, after his biological mother died from a drug overdose. His new home was in East Oakville's poorest district. He had a history of being involved in petty crime, which eventually led to him serving multiple juvie sentences. Samuel is currently Virginia's youngest death row inmate at 20, convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death 2 years ago at 18. Before leaving my job and becoming a tutor, a job that grants more free time than I know what to do with, I worked in the records unit of a police department. And as you can imagine, I've read about all kinds of crime. But so rarely did I come across one with a death sentencing, and when I did, I was always perplexed by the reasoning. I'm going to have to be perfectly open for the introduction of this blog and say that I don't believe Samuel Patterson, in spite of being found guilty of murder by a 12-person jury, should die for his crime. After all my years, I'm not even sure anyone should be, but that's a discussion I'll come to later. I'm guessing that of everyone who knows about the case, there'll be a clear split between those who agree with me and those who disagree. That's fine. To that end, I hope any readers will indulge me as I use this blog to investigate this specific case and feel open to share your personal thoughts and opinions on the case of Silent Sammy. Okay, what happened? So in a shortened down, simplified version, this is the case of Samuel Patterson. A little over 2 years ago, Samuel, an 18-year-old boy from Oakville, Virginia, broke into the Franklin residence in Spring Valley, North Oakville, in search of Michael Franklin, a 53-year-old property developer. When he discovered Michael Franklin was not currently present, he locked Janet Franklin, Michael's wife, and Natasha Franklin, Michael's daughter, in a utility closet, where they remained until Michael's death. Upon Michael's arrival, Samuel was waiting for him, now armed with Michael's revolver. Michael's attempts to calm Samuel failed, and he shot Michael twice in the chest, killing him almost immediately. Samuel then fled through a smashed patio door. Both Janet and Natasha heard the whole thing from the utility closet. After police took statements and found further CCTV showing Samuel having a heated confrontation at a coffee store earlier that day, they arrested him at his apartment in East Oakville, where they also found an expensive necklace belonging to the victim's wife, Janet. Furthermore, forensics was able to confirm that Sam's DNA had been found on Michael's body. Sam was tried for murder at a preliminary hearing 6 days later and then sent to prison. A further trial took place 5 months later. Shockingly, for the duration of the trial, he said nothing. He gave no statements. He refused to echo or provide a new alibi. His lawyer worked the entirety of his defense without calling on the defendant once. Some speculated that his time in prison had led him to give up on his initial attempts to claim he was innocent. Or perhaps it was pride. Perhaps he wanted the attention, as many killers do. Samuel Patterson was sentenced to death after only one day on trial. Okay, next blog post is a brief timeline of alleged events. Okay, so the following is based on my combined readings of documents released by Oakville PD, the prosecution, and defense. As objectively as I can, I present to you a timeline of alleged events from the night of Michael Franklin's murder. Okay, 11:11 a.m., Michael sat in Oakville Coffee. Sam arrives. They appear to collide, which prompts them to argue. The argument turns physical after Sam pushes Michael. 11:15, Michael rushes away. Sam loses track of where he went, but is heard shouting, "I'll effing kill you," by the barista. At 11:30, Sam makes a phone call while fleeing the scene. He supposedly uses the word disappear. However, this part of the barista's statement was deemed inadmissible, and I probably shouldn't include it. 12:30 p.m., Sam's laptop location confirms he returned home. He began doing several incriminating searches, including Train Oakville. 1:22 p.m., Sam receives a phone call from an encrypted number. 1:24 p.m., Sam supposedly searches Spring Valley, Oakville, the road Michael lives on. 2:11 p.m., Sam breaks into Michael's home. Michael's daughter, Natasha, and wife, Janet, are the only ones in. His behavior described by Natasha as angry and frustrated. She forces them into a closet, locks the door, and waits. 2:22 p.m., Michael arrives at the house to find Sam, now armed with a gun, waiting for him. He tries to calm Sam. 2:24 p.m., Michael is shot twice in the chest by Sam. 2:27 p.m., shortly after he shouts to Janet and Natasha in the closet, "Say nothing," though there are conflicting reports of this. He then smashes a window and flees. 2:29 p.m., Janet and Natasha break out of the closet, finding Michael dead on the floor. 2:56 p.m., 27 minutes later, the police are called. 27 minutes later, after they got out of the closet. Okay, all right. 3:26 p.m., a search of the local area begins to find the killer. Footprints are found heading towards Oakland East. And then 7:23 p.m., a review of CCTV from the coffee store leads Sam to be a suspect. 8:11 p.m., police arrest Sam at his flat under suspicion of murder. Police are unable to find his phone. They find a necklace belonging to Janet Franklin. And then 8:59 p.m., police interview Sam at the station, take DNA samples. 27 hours later, DNA matching Sam's was found on Michael's body, and he was charged with the murder of Michael Franklin. The trial that followed presented a relatively conclusive argument for Sam's guilt. However, there are holes in the evidence that I intend to explore, as well as possibly misconduct from the lead in his investigation. The question remains for me, how conclusive do we need to be before we send someone to die? And is Sam's crime deserving of death? Y'all, why did it take so long for the wife and the daughter to call the cops? Like, it took almost 30 minutes for them to call the cops. Y'all, I got a theory. I have a theory. I'm gonna keep it to myself though. I'm gonna keep it to myself, and I'm gonna save it for a main video, but I think I know what happened. Or I got some idea of what happened. But listen, that's the timeline. That's the timeline of events. Okay, the next blog post is called "A Questionable Officer." Something that drew me in on the case of Samuel is that the initial investigation was led by a man named Marcus Anderson, an officer whose conviction history is plagued with accusations of false evidence and a clear bias against minorities. Child, okay. One of them, a 24-year-old African-American named Lewis Hinton, was convicted for the rape of a young woman named Alice just outside Oakville. That's not her real name, by the way. Hinton had been seen in the area around the same time, heading back from a night out, and was positively identified by the victim. Hinton spent 3 years in prison before CCTV evidence suddenly emerged that proved his innocence, and he was eventually set free. The victim later confessed that she had been manipulated and pressured by Anderson into incriminating Hinton. She claims, and I quote, "He asked if he was the man who did it. I said, I don't think so. Then he asked if she thought he would be capable of doing something like that based on his appearance. She said, I don't know. Then he said, a man like that is more than capable, and if you don't help to put him away, then it should forever be on your conscience." It's important to note that the officer Anderson denied ever saying any of that. But let's just say he did. What if he did the same to the witnesses in Sam's case? The point is, I'm about to start exploring each piece of evidence in this case. And before doing so, I wanted you all to know about Anderson because innocent or guilty, it will be an important factor in what's to come. Okay, so we got a Mark Furman type character in this case here. Look, boy, you guilty. You guilty. Something about you and your eyes, your beady eyes, I don't like it. Okay, next we got evidence of the coffee store. This will likely be the first of several posts and one of the longest where we can discuss individual evidence and events. For the sake of things not getting too confusing, I'll do them in chronological order, though don't quote me on that. To get updated on that order, you can revisit one of my previous blogs where I wrote a timeline of events. We already read that. A barista at the coffee store claims to have seen the fight between Michael and Sam, saying Sam was highly aggressive. She claims to have no idea of how the conflict started, but it appears that Michael had attempted to discuss something with Sam, who claims they'd never met beforehand. After the fight, Michael fled, and when Sam failed to catch him, he shouted, "I'll effing kill you." He later heard him on the phone outside saying he'd need help to disappear, but retracted that later, saying she couldn't remember clearly enough. Regarding the phone call, Sam makes multiple calls this day to an encrypted number. For the testimony given by the barista, it at one point appeared as if he was asking someone to help him disappear. Curiously, I've not been able to source the footage itself during my investigation, so the following is based on transcripts written after the trial. It is not entirely reliable. If the CCTV transcripts convey anything, it's that the barista's testimony was true. The footage allegedly shows us that Sam's temper in this moment is visibly short. He clearly initiates the conflict, pushing Michael multiple times, intimidating him, and then they shout at one another. It's worth noting that we really do have no way of telling what was being said, and apparently anyone who claimed they could lip read from that footage are full of it. The quality and frame rate are so low you could mistake it for stop motion. So based on what we heard, we can now confirm factually. At approximately 11:10 a.m., Sam arrives at Oakville Coffee. Sitting at a table on the far end of the store is Michael Franklin. As Sam enters, Michael climbs out of his seat and approaches Sam. It's unclear whether they are approaching each other or simply walking in opposite directions. However, they do in fact collide. Shortly after Sam pushes Michael with force, Sam pushes Michael again. Sam shouts at him. Michael then flees. Sam follows after him, visibly angry. Anything more or less you've heard about these events was based not able to be proved or was speculative. We can't confirm Sam saying, "I'll effing kill you," but if his actions after the coffee store tell us anything, if he did say it, he probably meant it. Okay, here's the evidence before the murder. This one will be a super short update, mostly because I feel bad for waffling so much in the last one. After sifting through more documents, I came across specific searches Samuel made prior to the murder. Train, Oakville to California, Oakville dump, Spring Valley, Oakville. I don't know about you, but if I was thinking of killing someone, I don't think I'd search for Oakville to California trains just before. That being said, this is a guy who followed that by then searching for the address of his victim. He probably thought he could dispose of the laptop the same way he did with his phone. Sam claimed these were fake, that he hadn't Googled the address. I'm inclined not to believe him, but the document also states that a certain Officer Anderson was the one who reported in the evidence. Officer Furman reported the evidence. All right, this is the murder weapon. The biggest question of them all in the case of Samuel Patterson is a very simple one. Where is the gun? The bullets found in the body were .38. This matches Janet's claim that her husband owned a Ruger LCR .38, and their testimonies both declare they recognized the gun for definite as Michael's own. Further background checks confirmed that yes, he owned the gun in the first place. So where is it? Samuel took it with him, that we know, but it was never found. This implies that between 2:30 p.m. and his arrest at 8 p.m., Samuel was able to dispose of the weapon permanently. His home was searched, the area around Michael's house was searched. I'm willing to bet most of Oakville was turned upside down. No gun. Not that it entirely matters, but 2 witnesses and bullets prove that there was a gun and it was Michael's model. Janet's description of Sam searching the house lines up with him finding it in the office desk. Probably one of the first places I'd look for a gun, if I'm honest. Samuel did research local landfills, but considering half of Oakville's trash is put in one place, good luck finding a 5-inch hunk of metal. All right, the necklace. I briefly touched on the necklace found at Samuel's apartment in the Timeline blog, but I realized in all my blogs breaking down the evidence, I hadn't yet talked about it properly, in spite being so crucial to the conviction. The necklace, which was worth a lot, was found at the bottom of a wardrobe in Sammy's apartment the following day from his arrest. It was found by none other than Officer Anderson, Officer Furman. Janet Franklin had reportedly noticed the necklace was missing 3 weeks prior to this, meaning although it's not possible to pinpoint exactly when Samuel acquired it, 2 narratives were formed in the trial on why Samuel owned the necklace. 1, Samuel found it while searching for the gun. Janet told police, not on record, that she noticed it was missing several weeks prior, but had not properly searched for it as she assumed she probably left it somewhere like the office. She further claimed that she had a habit of doing her makeup in Michael's office, and therefore it was possible she left it in there. Samuel allegedly found the gun in Michael's office. It's not impossible that he would find the necklace there too. 2, Samuel had broken in prior and stolen it. This was implied by the prosecution and struck from the record shortly after. It implies that Samuel had robbed from the Franklins before and had taken the necklace on this occasion, someone before 3 weeks prior. However, this contradicted much of the prosecution's argument. Samuel meeting Franklin at the coffee store, Samuel searching the address, etc. The prosecution therefore requested to strike their line of inquiry successfully. I have a third suggestion though. Remember when we discussed the search history? In the time Samuel was still answering questions, he disputed the search history of all things, claiming he had searched Spring Valley, Oakville weeks prior to the date on this history. Maybe this was an accidental telling of the truth? What if Sam had not only searched Spring Valley, but had been there too? Hell, Samuel had attempted to steal from people in West Oakville before. Perhaps nothing had changed. Let's read Samuel's childhood, y'all. I noticed there's a lot of hatred towards Samuel on forums, including criticism towards my own questioning of his trial. Make no mistake, the point of me being here isn't to say he could be innocent. Let's be real here. This isn't an Avery situation or anything of that sort. All I want to do is understand why he was sentenced to death for his crime, in spite of flawed trial and his silence. But it's the nature of an investigation of this sort that we should try and understand who this person was and in turn, why he did what he did. With that in mind, I think we should look into who Samuel was before he was a murderer. Alleged murderer, girl. Samuel Patterson was a kid living in a tiny apartment in Virginia. If that sounded glamorous, it shouldn't. This was a kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms built into a single room. At least the bathroom was separate. Samuel's parents were high school sweethearts. His father was a quarterback, and his mother was considered among the brightest students. However, when they were 17, Samuel's mother became pregnant. Their studies halted and their predestined futures faded away. In its place was the promise of a wedding after they turned 18 and financially stable jobs to provide for baby Samuel. But when Samuel was 3, his father had taken a job working with the Johnstown Company, and while driving back from a late shift, died in a head-on collision with a long haul. His death led Samuel's mother down a dark path. What started as a couple of pills before picking Samuel up from school later spiraled out of control. Little is known about Samuel during this time, but I guess it only takes little imagination to fill in the gaps. When Samuel was 7 years old, child services were not a new sight to him, yet somehow he'd never been taken away. When Samuel was 9 years old, his mother overdosed while he was in the apartment, later dying of heart failure. Samuel was moved to North Oakville, adopted by the Patterson family. However, by the time he was in his early teens, he ran away and never returned. The Pattersons were never able to find him. Samuel was alone at 14, growing up in one of the poorest districts in Virginia. It doesn't surprise me he took a turn for the worse so young. It doesn't surprise me that escalated. It doesn't surprise me that he may have become a murderer. Okay, burning with guilt. You want to know another way to make people think you're guilty? The evening after someone you encountered prior is shot, burn the clothes you've been wearing all day. At 11:17 p.m. on the night of the murder, police were forwarded a call via the fire brigade that someone had reported the smell of burning in a block not too far from Samuel's apartment, where they'd arrested him hours before. The burning was traced to a set of private storage bellow. The burning was traced to a set of private storage bellow, but okay. Okay, spell check, y'all. The burning was traced to a set of private storage below an apartment building. Inside, there was nothing but a pile of burnt clothes on the ground. When they looked closer at the burned garments, it was the jacket and pants Samuel had been wearing at Oakville Coffee earlier that day. They also matched the description of the black outfit the murderer was wearing at the time. Samuel was true to character and remained silent on this. I can't talk from experience, but my advice to any aspiring murderers out there: burning clothes doesn't always work, and it makes you look very guilty. Okay, Sam's criminal past. Long before the murder of Michael Franklin, Samuel had served time in juvie for a crime with a surprising resemblance. In 2014, Samuel was arrested for assault and attempted robbery, all of which was captured on CCTV. Samuel Patterson, 15, Max Heyman, 14, and a still unidentified assailant attempted to rob Richard Slack, 50, who was walking back from work in West Oakville to his home. They had seen him carry a briefcase to and from work for the past few days and decided it could be a hefty payoff. They likely also noticed the expensive watch on his wrist. The robbery was botched, however, after he fought back. A fight ensued as Samuel and the unidentified assailant pushed, kicked, and punched Richard. He tried as hard as he could to fend off the three young boys. However, after a short while, he was overpowered. Richard was then stabbed in the abdomen with a penknife. It was still unclear who stabbed him. Max fled with the other unidentified robber, leaving Sam alone with Richard in a brief moment of hesitation before fleeing with the others. Richard was left writhing on the floor in pain, searching for someone to help. When the police finally arrived, Richard was taken to hospital and, despite some severe injuries, survived. Max and Samuel were both arrested and both took a plea. Max received 6 months juvenile detention, while Sam was given 1 year. However, Sam's detention was extended by an additional year after becoming the prime suspect of the stabbing. He got more time without them knowing that he... Okay. Neither of the boys ever identified the third robber, nor ever specified which of them had stabbed the man. Max claimed he'd never met the guy before that day, so didn't really know. However, Sam simply wouldn't answer, adding to his detention extension for obstruction of justice. Sam was 17 when he was released from juvie, having served 2 separate sentences. At the time of his evaluation, he was deemed on a strong path of rehabilitation. However, his repeated crimes lead to some doubt. I guess we know how that turned out. The crimes line up quite neatly, don't they? The attempted robbery of a rich, middle-aged man gone wrong. Maybe Samuel's crimes are less about survival and stem from a place of bitterness or frustration. I'm only speculating, though. The only thing is, now you know this little bit of history about Sam. I think you can or cannot avoid it influencing your perspective on his eventual murder charges. I like this blog, but they need to proofread this. Okay. All right, the nail in Sam's coffin. So I won't pretend that I've not cast a shadow of doubt over everything I've talked about so far, from evidence to testimonies and trials alike. Whether it's purely circumstantial as to whether Samuel could be innocent or not, at this point, I find it's impossible to deny the resounding proof of his guilt. But just in case you have any doubts, Sam's DNA was found on Michael's body, forensics confirmed. So yes, Samuel was in direct contact with the murder victim. Samuel countered this by claiming his DNA got there thanks to their coffee shop encounter earlier that day. Now that I've watched that video quite a number of times, I, like the jury and the prosecution, can confidently say that he only touches Michael's chest. So why was Samuel's DNA found on Michael's wrist too? All right, so where am I now? Where do I stand on it? Well, to me, it seems entirely possible and probable that Samuel Patterson did kill Michael Franklin, but the questions that are raised by the inconclusive evidence leave me conflicted. I think it's leave me conflicted. We can't put together a comprehensive timeline. We can't place We can't place each person's movements without them being inconsistent. Murders are skewed and assumptions are made. So what can I say? Retrial? Release? Perhaps not. But I can comfortably say that I don't believe Samuel should be on death row, even if guilty for his crime. There's one too many questions for him to be considered guilty beyond reasonable doubt. I'm running low on aspects of this case to explore, and honestly, I don't feel like I've come close to understanding why he was sentenced, nor do I fully understand what happened. Sure, there's a narrative, but do things seem so crystal clear that Samuel should die? If only I could ask the guy directly, what the hell happened? Okay, and then the last blog post, y'all, is Samuel's wardrobe. A quick note on the case, I found image proof of Samuel's change in clothes. See my previous blog on the borrowed remains. It's clear from these images that in spite of his denial, he definitely changed clothes before, after, or during the murder. See below. So outfit 1 is CCTV from the coffee store several hours prior to the murder. Okay, y'all, Samuel is on the left, so he has like I guess that's a white jacket or maybe a tan jacket and some pants, and then Michael's on the right. And outfit 2 is from Samuel's interrogation several hours after the murder. And he's wearing a black and green jacket with a blue t-shirt. During the coffee store incident, he's clearly wearing a different jacket and perhaps t-shirt to when he was interrogated by Officer Anderson in the evening. So answer me this. Why would someone who had no involvement in a crime change into different clothes after it was committed? All right, y'all, so that was a long video, I know, but I just needed to comb over all the evidence, all the details, everything that we know so far about this case. I got some good insight into what other messages I want to unlock when we get back into the story. It's another thread I want to unlock about that stabbing that happened back in the day. Not the Michael Franklin case, but the crime that we got in juvie about. Samuel gotta be covering for somebody, man. He gotta be covering for somebody, because why is he silent through all this? Why is he quiet? And also, why did it take almost 30 minutes for the mom and the daughter to call the cops after Michael was dead? And then it was a dirty cop that was first on the scene. It's a whole lot of questions, y'all. It's a whole lot of questions. But listen, we're going to get to the bottom of it. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.